And live from Brussels, it's ZN Live. We are very excited today to have a special guest, Tomi Huhtanen, who is the Executive Director of the Martin Center, the think tank for the EPP. And he's actually got extensive experience in policy. He's been working over 20 years in the field, actually from a senior advisor to the EPP, to his executive director role in the Martin Center, but also he's the founder and chief editor of European View. So he has extensive experience. And I want to start with one question. Of course, we've had the Finnish election, which is obviously happening at a very significant moment in history. So you've been very interested in the topic and in the changes that happen. What do you think we learn from the results of that election? And since we're interested in communication, what role did communication play in the outcome that we saw?
So thanks, Philip, and thanks for inviting. So first of all, it was very particular election. Also, if we speak about communication, as we know, the National Coalition Party, Kokoomus won, but maybe the biggest interest also European and international was on Sanna Marin, let's be very frank. And number one, and number two, how these current elections would play out, take into account her big visibility, not only of course in Finland, but internationally. And so that's one element. She had very exceptional visibility also in social media, communication. She used very bold communication, which resonated well in her core support group, but also caused some controversy. And so it was that then dynamic and her personal profile, which was the main tool for the ruling Social Democrat Party. And it's true that National Coalition won, but has to be said that also Social Democrats did not do bad result. What is interesting to conclude is now that actually the expectation was a little bit that she would stay as a chair of Social Democrat Party, and maybe in 4 years there would be a new chance for her because the new next government will have very difficult times. But she decided to leave the scene. She has announced that she will resign, and in autumn news, chairperson will be elected. So that's quite interesting also. What's the point? The point is that what she mentioned is that one of the reasons why she left is because it was also psychologically very tough times. And I think that's the case. But one of our former prime ministers said very well that when you do that, when you go more personal on social media, you get stronger emotions, but positive, but also negative. It can be very tough.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good point. I mean, it's an interesting example where a very strong person with a strong personal brand, I guess felt a lot of pressure as a result of that. Do you think that is there any particular lessons in communication that you learn from the result of the election? Does it mean maybe it's better to be focused on the basic issues, or what is your kind of takeaway in terms of lessons for communicators?
What surprised me, to be frank, because is that the narrative which finally led to the victory of the National Coalition Party, etc., was of course the fact that they were underlining that the state budget and public finances were in bad shape. Now, in some European countries, that wouldn't be maybe so big issue, but in Finland, it's particularly, Finns are sensitive about that. A little bit like Germans with the interest rates, and so or inflation. Sorry. And so what surprised me is in that how far Sanna Marin could go with this. I don't know, would I say populistic, but very, very straightforward, quite simplistic argumentation, on and painting the picture. And she got quite good result. And then secondly, again, as we said, the strength of personalization, use the personal profile. What we are seeing since last decades, as the politics gets more complex and more difficult to understand, personal profile becomes more and more important on the other hand. But on the other hand, also the single issues, for example, the one of the other who had victory in elections, through Finns, they were, in terms of electoral narratives, they actually say that we don't do electoral program. We don't do that. So they have their political program, but for the election, they did not do any program, and they just focused on a couple of issues, and again they got very, very good result. So for me, as a kind of more classic traditional school politician or a political analyst, it is for me it looks like that this fighting the media, communication, images, messages, and especially person related are and become more and more important, and we can see in the last Finnish elections.
Yeah, I think there's a great deal of uncertainty. I mean, it's getting very difficult to predict outcomes of elections, because there's so many new factors that play a role that we haven't really experienced before. Of course, this took place in the middle of a war in Ukraine, and obviously that war affects everyone in Europe, particularly in Finland. And with the discussion around NATO. Now, I want to ask you a little bit about how you're seeing this. Of course, the official decision to join NATO was taken some time back, but it's now happening officially. But in terms of the conversation around the war, I feel that there's been some peaks where everyone is talking about it, dominates the news. But now I feel that we're back into a situation where other topics are pushing this away from the news, and it's becoming less prominent. Do you agree with that? And do you think that's dangerous, because basically it means attention falls away from that? And so, do you think it's important to keep that top of mind? And what do people need to do that so that it stays in the public consciousness?
Yeah. If you look at polling about the support for Ukraine or EU's efforts to support Ukraine, it's quite solid. Of course, very surprisingly, it has been surprisingly solid, especially in the eastern part of Europe, Nordic part, Baltic states, Central Eastern Europe. On the other hand, and then actually Spain and Portugal, which are quite far away, so for them, I guess it's more like a moral question, but when you go south, there's more nuances. Let's put it this way: Italy, Greece, even more discussion. So that on the other hand, we see that the political leadership in all countries are rather solid on supporting Ukraine. And so you question how will these dynamics change and what are the risks. I think that there has been the reason why there has not been, or the support has remained quite strong is, first of all, because of the Russian military actions in atrocities. They have created a situation that, especially for politicians to say that we should somehow find a compromise with Russia, has been very, very difficult, number one. And number two, because the big concerns that we had about energy security and energy prices and all that, because of various factors, didn't materialize. So we had the winter was difficult, but it was less difficult than we thought. So, but how it will change in the future? I think if the risk is indeed that if the war gets stagnated, and number one, and number two, we are now in spring. It's sunny outside here in Brussels, but the winter is coming still, and the cold times, and it's quicker than we think. And the problem here is that we are a little bit, EU member states have not totally secured yet for example, gas storage for the upcoming winter. So you may end up in a situation that we have pretty much the same situation than now this winter. The volatility of the prices going up, and that combined with the the stalemate situation could lead to a situation where you start to discuss the sense of the war, and so that is the issue here. I think at the moment it's quite solid, and there is no big movement in the EU member states, but that can change.
Yeah, so I mean, most people refer to Zelensky as one of the most effective communicators. Certainly in the last year, he brought the narrative, the Ukrainian story, really top of mind, very creatively using new channels. How effective do you think he's been personally as an individual in bringing a certain narrative for Ukraine to the world community, the press, politicians, etc.? And how important do you think being able to do that is to a politician today?
I think Zelensky is now by far, iconic figure of European modern history by definition. And number one, and number two, how it was played, the first moments, the video speeches in the front of the presidential palace in the first days of the war. I think it was crucial for the narrative in a very delicate moment where many things could have happened. That braveness and etc. will not be forgotten, and I think that is his strength. Number one, and number two, still not so long ago when he visited Brussels, even when in the conditions where we have in Europe, we have a quite nuanced discussion also about war in Ukraine. The support is there, but underneath there are many kind of discussion. You could see how all the heads of states wanted to be in the same setting in the European Parliament, how that all played out. And actually Zelensky used that very skillfully then to negotiate more support from the EU member states. And also, thirdly, all these online speeches in the different European parliaments, inviting personalities come to Kiev, have created, very strong commitment from EU to Kiev, which will not be forgotten, at least by the Ukrainian people. And that's a direction. But but about your question about the personalization, I think, as I say, world is getting more complex. It's more difficult for politicians to articulate holistic views on how to resolve those problems. On the other hand, European audience who is well educated, but there's a limit to it, how much time they use to analyze political scene or some parties and candidates' qualities. So the tendency is then to go for personality, personal profile, emotional issues which emotionally resonate. On the other hand, of course, one single issues. They may choose a politician, a little bit forgetting maybe all her or his positions in the past years, but because of this and that position, they fall for it. So that's what we see. To conclude, if we see in the political parties across the board from the center right to the left, more and more parties see, as have always seen, and that has been always the function, but it's still there even stronger, is that the parties are the entities to find the right personalities, the candidates, because you can have all. You can have the structure, the ideology, the momentum, etc., etc. But many times you need the personality. You need somebody to present the troops, and it is and when you have that person, like case of Sanna Marin for Social Democrats in Finland, it is a risk, it is a benefit, and it is advantage, but it can be a big risk when that person then, for example, makes mistakes.
Yeah, it creates a spotlight on people's personality, and the best way for people to do that today is, of course, to use social media channels so that they can tell their story in the way they want, and then hope that story gets picked up in the way they presented it. You've been talking more on LinkedIn recently. You had a training with Liora. How is your thinking on LinkedIn as a tool for policy discussion in Brussels and Europe? How effective do you see it, and what has been your kind of learnings recently?
Yeah, to be frank, I was social media started maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. I was more active in Twitter, etc., and maybe I didn't feel the benefit at that point, but most likely it was for the fact that I maybe didn't invest enough. Now, as you mentioned, I have had a new start. So where does it lead? I don't know, but indeed, I think that you have to. I think you have to make that mental step that you audit your time and then just accept that. Maybe because I'm very very young, but I think I'm not so young anymore. And I think the shift one has to make, especially if you have been using the traditional tools, that this is now the new space. And it is as relevant as going to the seminar and speaking to the audience and going to cocktails. You should not overdo it, but you should not underdo it either. And my experience is quite positive. I see it's interesting. People are, I just started some time ago, and I see, journalists suddenly, after relatively, just putting ideas and using certain tools, suddenly journalists are connecting me, and I have a visibility and connection. So I'm going to continue it, but of course the issue there is not just to. I think you need to try to have points of view, information, and I think we agree. It's in all communication, especially in Brussels bubble. It's not the buzzword. With buzzwords, you can get far in elections, but especially in a policy environment like in Brussels, you have to have the content. Now, I'm not me, Tomi. I don't necessarily have always the content, but luckily I have very good colleagues here who always help me out on that. So I'm very blessed on that.
Okay. You posted actually something on Macron recently. So that got some discussion going. Were you surprised by that? Has that kind of got, was that a way to start a political conversation on the topic?
Yeah, I think, of course, you had a lot of Macron's, let's say, mistakes or statements on Taiwan and the United States. There was a big discussion. Actually, it became more and more heated. The point is, of course, there. Actually, it's a classical. Actually, you could say, which I mentioned in the social media. I think it's a classical. To put it this way, I think what Macron is doing a little bit with France is like Trump with the United States, in the sense that the United States during the Trump period was criticized because of Trump's statements on Europe and this communicated lack of commitment, of which Europeans were very concerned. But if you look at the facts on the ground, Trump administration was extending its presence in the Eastern Europe. Everything continued as normal and even more. And so you had this gap between the reality and the communication. And Macron, by his statements, is now doing a little bit the same in the sense that, for example, France is continuously contributing European security and defense development, is very much present. It's also supporting Ukraine. Is very, very important player. But then you have Macron, who kind of what he seems to be doing is just throwing ideas and things on the air and seeing which of them then take off and becomes like a balloons. And suddenly, what we see lately is that those balloons are not working very, very well. But sometimes I think it's, and to conclude, also in this political situation, because of that communication, I think France has lost a little bit the opportunity to, as a military power in Europe, especially after UK have left. It would have excellent opportunity to have leadership also involved in Ukraine. little bit more listening Central and Eastern European, being more understanding what are those concerns, what are those accents, what kind of messaging they want. On the other hand, and then on foreign policy in general, and I think a little bit because of this blunders of Macron that has been a little bit lost. But also, I leave it there.
Yeah, and with all these changes, I mean, what would be your advice to young communicators today, people entering into the political world? What are the things that they need to know? What are the new skills they need to acquire?
I notice, as when we, for example, speak about communication here in Martens Center, or my colleagues tell me what are the realities, and we see that people who have multi experiences, there's the different platforms, videos, TV, radio, podcast. That's what also we here in Martens Center do. We have various podcasts, videos, etc., etc. So you need to people who understand those too. But also as a politician, you need to understand the dynamics of that, and you need to understand the dynamics also in the term of your time auditing, because there's so much you can do, and you have to a little bit, decide on what you're focused. Then you have to, of course, understand a little bit your audiences, on what is your target group. For example, you mentioned LinkedIn. It's a very specific audience there. And I see, for example, just to give an example, I'm in a Facebook, but I hardly post anything. Why? Because of my own experience. I noticed the same posts. If I put in a Facebook, there's no resonance. I go to LinkedIn and the discussion starts. So so you need to understand each tool and its segments, what each tool is focusing at. Then you need to know the content at the end of the day. You don't always need to be recreate some new outstanding insight, but you need to understand the facts and the dynamics and the discussion. And it's not so very complicated. If you follow the discussion certain amount of years, I think you start to get sensitivity what plays and what plays out. And many times also, your own intuition is helping you. You have to be self-confident about your ideas, and then you need to adapt and really take risks, and not to. Sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it goes so bad. But that's that's the game.
Well, first of all, I think you're always underplaying yourself, because in the responses to your post about Macron, I saw the depth of your knowledge, and so I think you know so much, and I think people are very eager to hear from you. What I was wondering is when you compare the responses to your media performances, and I know you've been interviewed by various news outlets in the last couple of weeks, for example, to the responses you get to LinkedIn, and as you said, Facebook as well. Where do you get more responses? Do people say to you personally, "Oh, I saw you on Euronews," or do you get more response to LinkedIn? Where do you get the most feedback from?
From expert community, I would say. Expert community, and then so that's the main source of the feedback I get. Plus, then of course, some people I know around Europe, and when, for example, if one is in Euronews, so it's seen all around, and so the comments. But it's mainly expert community. People reaching out. Hey, I did see you in, I don't know, some Asian outlet, and some person Indian here in Europe wants to contact me, and it kind of everything links to everything, I would say.
Yeah, because as I said to you, I think when you are interviewed on a channel, that's your excellent opportunity to take your best parts where you feel happiest about what you said, take them out, put them on LinkedIn, and share them with the world, capture your key points, and then make sure that everyone sees them, rather than just hoping that people will watch it or come across it, because I have still not seen them. I'm still waiting for you to summarize your points on the Indian channel you said.
I'm getting there. Exactly.
Because I think that's where most people are watching you, And so those are excellent opportunities. So now we're going to go to the recommendations.
So, Tommy, what are your recommendations for our viewers and listeners?
Recommendation. I usually
your book recommendation.
Yeah, I usually go for more of like a policy analysis and reading about politics and so forth. But in communication, the one book which kind of I always remember that comes to my mind, it's impressed me. It's kind of classic. It's Words That Work by Frank Luntz, which is a little bit controversial Republican spin doctor. And it's this classic idea that about framing, about how to define certain subject, how just change of the words can turn the tables in the communication. And on the other hand, how redefining words can be very extremely powerful tool in politics. And what surprises me, when I go to that book again, is that actually, as also working with political strategy, how quickly we forget those tools. So that would I would recommend.
Excellent. Leora, what is your recommendation this week?
My recommendation is to go to The Hague and to see the works of Escher, of course, known for his optical illusions. There's a magnificent exhibition. Of course, he's known for his impossible architectural works, but he wasn't actually very good at math, but he's at the same time known for his for being an intuitive mathematician, praised by mathematicians themselves. He flunked math in high school, didn't actually finish high school, but then got accepted for the technical university in Delft, which is where my parents live. And because that was possible at that time, not to finish high school, but still go to university. He came from a good family, moved to Italy at a higher age. It tells of his whole life story. Quite interesting and beautiful as well. You see all those famous paintings with the animals as well as the buildings. They've even built pieces of buildings there as well. And it's quite beautiful and interesting. And you see his early works up to his later works. Of course, in the wood engraving and lithographs. And he made prints even for famous stores in the Netherlands, which I think are still in use. And so definitely very interesting to watch how, he went for the longest time, he wasn't able to sell his works. It was quite poor. And he had to just, as I said, had to sell packaging for the Bijenkorf, which is like the Dutch version of Inno. The Inno store. So that's how he made his living. But all just amazingly beautiful to look at, amazingly interesting to look at how the stairs just had, never stopped and ended. So if you're interested in art, if you're interested in intuitive mathematics, then definitely go check out this exhibition.
Yeah, Escher is absolutely fantastic. And you can check him online. I wonder if you can use an AI to do some recombinations of Escher, because I think it's very much in that space. My recommendation this week is the book from Daniel Pink, When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing, which is actually applicable for, politics, communication. And it's the question of, when you do something, when you have a conversation, what happens when you do it at certain times based on your energy level, your focus, and people's general different responses to different times. They've done studies showing that judges tend to increase the punishment they give to people depending on the time of the day that they give out those punishments, which is pretty scary. We are not objective. We are, influenced by a whole series of factors. So he goes deep into that and gives you tips for how to do better. Yes, Leora?
Well, that's why we need AIs. You know that an AI, of course, now finished a whole medical exam in the US and was able to find a rare disease in a matter of seconds. And if you know that millions of diseases are misdiagnosed every year, and millions of people die every year because of misdiagnosis, including my mother, who wasn't diagnosed properly for years. It's the same with these such things. What if we just leave the sentencing up to AIs instead of judges who just give a sentence based on the time of day? That doesn't seem to be very fair. What if an AI just does it purely based on facts and other relevant sentences in the past?
So maybe AI is going to save us before it destroys us. So let's see what happens. Fascinating conversation. That's all we have time for. Tomi, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Very interesting. Let's continue the conversation online, especially on LinkedIn. Have a fantastic sunny weekend, we hope. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.